Enlightenment. You know, like Sesame Street, brought to you by the letter A, Declaration of Independence, brought to you by the Enlightenment. Some things we're going to cover today. That's a fancy way of showing you the standards we're going to hit, or one of the standards we're going to hit. But really and truly, this is what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about the Declaration, or I'm going to talk about the Declaration. And before today is finished, what I would like for you to be able to do is understand the meaning and the purpose of the Declaration, especially the way it's influenced by the Enlightenment. We've been talking since the beginning of the year about Hobbes and Locke, liberty and security. The Enlightenment, you will see almost word for word the ideas of John Locke in the Declaration of Independence today. I want to keep talking about that question, which is more important, liberty or security? And I'd like you to think, as you look at the Declaration, at least the parts we're looking at, we don't get into great detail on the grievances, but the beginning part of the Declaration, does that seem like the citizens are more concerned with their liberty or their security? Maybe a different way to say that is, are they more concerned about being free, or are they more concerned about being safe as they get ready to take on the most powerful empire on the face of the earth? You're also going to be able to use a primary source document, the Declaration, to help understand the ideas from the past, and then maybe think about what that Declaration still means to us today. Do we still value liberty more than security? Or does it change with time or situations? Is there any parallel today where you could see people thinking that it's time to overthrow the government because the government isn't meeting their needs or protecting their rights? I want you to think about that and how it might apply today. That's just for when we're in person, our norms for discussions. I'll skip that. So one thing I want you to start thinking about is, who was the Declaration of Independence really for? If you look at that picture, everybody in it, all 56 people, they look kind of the same. They're rich, white men. So one thing historians debate is, are those rich white men trying to further humankind with this Declaration of Independence and what we're doing? That's what I would call the high road view. Or are those 56 rich white men trying to declare independence and pull everybody else along so that they can become even more wealthy and even more powerful? That's what I would call the low road. That's what I would call doing the right thing for all the wrong reasons. And historians argue about that, and they don't really agree. Some say the high road, these guys are doing all the right things for all the right reasons. Some say the low road, they're doing the right things for all the wrong reasons. And I want you to think about that as we go through this today and look at this document. And really, as we go through this the rest of the year, this is the foundational principle upon which our country is built. Liberty for all. The idea that government serves the people. And if government quits serving the people, then the people have the right to overthrow it and make a new one. That's the foundation of what America is built on. And so we need to always consider whether we still hold that to be our foundation. Is that what should be, or is that what is guiding us as we move forward? So here's the thing about history. Sometimes when you study history, it makes you uncomfortable and makes you feel icky sometimes, even ashamed. It makes you upset, or it makes you angry. That's what good history should do. If you're studying history and it always makes you feel proud and happy, you're probably not doing it right. You're probably not really studying history. You're studying historical memory. So yeah, there's some really amazing things in the Declaration, but there's also some contradictions and I think some hypocrisy from the founders that we'll talk about as we progress through the year and through today. It's okay that there's that conflict. It's okay that it makes you uncomfortable. It should. It should, because that's where we grow. When we get into that uncomfortable space, that's where we start to grow. So let's look at the Declaration itself. It's written in 4 parts. There's the preamble, with really the introduction, the Declaration of Natural Rights. That's the part that everybody's most familiar with. The part where it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Then there's the list of grievances that nobody ever really talks about. But that list of grievances is really all the things that had made the colonists so angry that they finally decided that other part of the Declaration of Natural Rights, that idea where government's supposed to serve the people, and if it doesn't, then you have to overthrow it. That's what the list of grievances does. It lays out 28 things that the colonists were angry with Britain about, that they felt like they had tried to get fixed, but Britain wouldn't fix it. And then finally, at the end, there's the Resolution of Independence, where we officially declare ourselves to be independent from Great Britain. We're going to look at each of those in a little more detail as we go. So the main author of the Declaration was Thomas Jefferson. There were 5 people who were appointed to write this. The United States actually approved a resolution for independence on July the 2nd. And then they decided on July the 2nd we needed to write a document to explain to the world what we were doing. And so they appointed these 5 guys. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams were the most familiar on that committee. And they were kind of opposite in the way they thought politically later on, but they were pretty united here at the convention at Continental Congress, where they decided to write this declaration. But John Adams, who everybody thought would write it, said, no, Thomas Jefferson's going to write it. And this was a pretty amazing feat for John Adams, because he always thought he was the smartest guy in the room. This was a moment of humility. He said, there's a few reasons why you should write it, Thomas Jefferson. Number 1, you're from Virginia, and that makes a difference. Virginia was the most populous of the colonies. It was the first colony. It was a southern colony. And if Virginia went along with this, those other southern states would go along with it. Number 2, John Adams said, people like you and they don't like me. At least he recognized his shortcomings. And number 3, you're 10 times the writer that I am. He knew Jefferson could put something together that would change the world. And so he deferred to Jefferson, and almost everything Jefferson wrote got accepted. This is where we talk about that uncomfortable hypocrisy part. Thomas Jefferson is the one who penned those beautiful words. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. But at the time, he enslaved hundreds of people. He claimed as property hundreds of other people who weren't considered equal. And that is something that doesn't usually sit well with us. That's something we're going to have to dig into deeper on a different day. Not here, but I want you to start thinking about it, because it's really complicated. At the same time, he was trying to do things that would end slavery. And if you look at that part that got cut out, the only major part that got cut out was a big portion of the Declaration where Thomas Jefferson said, I know slavery is morally wrong, and we need to abolish slavery if we're going to live by this creed that all men are created equal. He actually tried to do that. So it's a little more complicated than you might think. What happened was the southern states said, we can't live with that. If that's going to be in there, then we're not part of this revolution and we're leaving. And if the southern states leave, then there is no revolution. It's over. So they pulled that part out in order to get all 13 of the colonies to agree to fight this war and agree to this Declaration of Independence. What's the purpose? I like to think of it as the greatest breakup letter of all time. Dear Great Britain, here's what we're doing. We're dumping you. Here's why we're dumping you. And here's a list of the 28 things we hate about you that made us have to do this. So we now declare ourselves broken up. It's really the decent thing to do. And that's what they say in the preamble. It's the decent thing to do. I have life advice for you in this part. If you're going to break up with somebody, don't do it by text. Break up with them face to face. Be nice about it. Be kind about it. I know it's hard and everybody's going to have hard feelings and somebody's going to walk away with a broken heart, but it's the decent thing to do it face to face and give them some reasons. Don't just ghost them and disappear from their social media life and think they get the hint. It doesn't work that way. People want to hear it. As hard as it is and as much as it hurts. Break up in a decent way, like we broke up in a decent way with Great Britain. This is the first time ever that a group of people actually did this. There had been revolutions since the beginning of government, since the beginning of human civilization, where people overthrew the leader and tried to go in a different direction. But nobody ever wrote it down and explained why they thought they had the right to do that. That's what happens here. And these ideas are also very influential around the world. The French Revolution is inspired by the American Revolution. Their Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson helped them write, with the Marquis de Lafayette, who helps us win the American Revolution later on. Revolutions in South America happen because of our American Revolution. Those South American countries who had been colonized by European countries rise up and rebel because of what these guys do. For a long time, I always said it's the first time people ever decided to govern themselves. And then I started to realize how ethnocentric that is. Native American tribes had been ruling themselves for a long time. The tribes in Africa and the natives in Australia and New Zealand, they'd been making up their own rules and governing themselves without a king for a really long time. It's just the first time in modern European history where people say, we don't need a king anymore. We can make our own rules. So the first part of the Declaration is called the preamble. It explains why we're writing this. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to break away from another, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind says that they should tell why. That's it. If you're going to dump somebody, tell them why. And then the Declaration of Rights part, that's where we see this heavy Enlightenment influence. Jefferson is writing under the ideas of Locke. Remember, Hobbes has this low road idea where if people are left to their own devices, there's going to be chaos until a leader emerges. And Hobbes says the people will give their sovereignty, their power over to that leader in a social contract. Well, Locke takes it a different way and says, no, we're not going to do it that way. Government's here to serve us. Government is our instrument. We are not the instruments of the government. Government should protect us and protect our rights. Our rights are more important than our safety, says John Locke. And he called them natural rights. If you look on the left in the italics, that's the words of the Declaration. On the right-hand side, that's paraphrased John Locke. You can see we called them unalienable rights. Jefferson did. Locke called them natural rights. Jefferson says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Locke says life, liberty, and property. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed. Government's job is to protect the rights of the people. They get their power from the people. And whenever government becomes destructive of those ends, when the government fails to protect the people's rights, then the people have a right and an obligation to overthrow that government and start a new one. Then we get into the list of grievances. The 28 things that people hated about King George. And I don't have them all on here on the next slide or next couple of slides, but I have a few on here. And we can look at it in more detail when we're face to face if we want. So this is where we have to start thinking, again, high road, low road. Are these lists of grievances that affect every single colonist or almost every single colonist? Or are these grievances only grievances that wealthy people have? Selfish reasons like power and money. This historian, Bernard Bailyn, he takes the high road. He thinks they're doing it for all the right reasons. He thinks that they believed, if you look in this second paragraph, he thinks that the signers of the Declaration, the creators of the Declaration, believed that America was destined to play a special role in history and that America would become the foundation of a great and mighty empire founded on the principles of liberty and freedom. All right, that's the high road. That means these grievances would be something that affects everyone, not just the wealthy. Then we have on the other side of that Howard Zinn. Howard Zinn takes the low road. And if you look down here, he thinks it's all about wealthy people trying to stir up, well, it's up here more. Wealthy people trying to stir up trouble among the less wealthy, getting them to fight for them in order to really just make themselves more wealthy and more powerful. And it clearly omits, he says, Native Americans, I would say free and enslaved Black people in America and women. And so Zinn says this was just something to help those rich white men. So let's look at some of the grievances here. These aren't all of them. Remember, there's 28. So if you just start looking through here, and we're going to look at every single one of them, but if you just start looking through here and read some of them, he's broken up certain legislatures. So that's governments here in the colonies that opposed him and refused to let others be elected. If you think about that, do legislatures represent everyone, or do legislatures only represent the wealthy? Well, you might have to dig a little deeper to answer that question. I don't know. It seems to me the ideal would be that legislatures are representing everyone. But I don't know that that's exactly the case in every one of those state legislatures. He's refused to establish courts of justice and has made judges dependent on him for their jobs and salaries. Well, everybody might need the court system. So that seems to be something that affects all people, not just the wealthy. That's what I want you to do, is go through each of those and try to figure that out. What do you think? Does it affect everyone or only the wealthy? Then finally, that last part of the Declaration is the Resolution of Independence. This is where we actually technically say we declare ourselves to be free and independent states. It also has the signatures of the 56 men who signed the Declaration of Independence. It lays out the powers that our government's going to have. As we declare independence and we're being governed by the Articles of Confederation, as a country, we have the power to declare war, to trade with other countries, and to form alliances. And so if we look at the signers, you've got John Hancock, who signs first. If you look around my room, you can find a copy of the Declaration hanging on a poster, and you can see his signature, much larger than everybody else's. This would indicate maybe he's signing it so King George could see it all the way from England. I've heard so he could read it without putting on his glasses. I don't know. But 56 people signed the Declaration, at least one from each of the 13 colonies. So once they do this, and they know that, they know this is coming, once they sign on this paper, they've committed treason, and treason is punishable by death. And that death is not going to be a pretty death. It's going to be a long, slow, tortured public process. And so the very end of it in the Declaration, it says, "We, the undersigned, pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor to the cause." And so they recognized it and they put it on there. I'd say that's probably why John Hancock signed his name so big. It was an act of defiance. He knew he was committing treason. And by signing his name that large, he was saying, I don't care what the consequences are. I want everybody to know I'm all in on this because that's how much I believe in it. That's why I think he signed it so big. Maybe he just thought he was really important, too important to not sign bigger than everybody else. Maybe he thought everybody else would sign that big. I don't know. It's kind of an interesting thing to think about. But that's the Declaration in its 4 parts. So think about, again, what's the purpose? Is this something that's being done for all the right reasons, or is this something that's being done for all the wrong reasons? Think about the Enlightenment and how John Locke influenced this. Natural rights and that doctrine of revolution. The idea that if people's rights aren't being protected by the government, then the people have the obligation to overthrow it. Those are Enlightenment ideals that make their way into the Declaration. So we can talk about this more in person if you want. You can always send me questions as well. I'll talk to you later. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.